Hi, I'm Dr. Jeremy Thompson. I'm a medical practitioner and I help people who are confused, people who have anxiety, depression, relationship problems. I help them to identify with their strong qualities that they have within them, help them to take control of their life so that they can end up leading the sort of life that they want. I'm also a family practitioner, which means that I don't just do counselling, I see all the people that come into me out of our community, which means I deal with everyday people like yourself. Okay, now this is video 3. In video 1 we talked about the mixed bag concept. If you haven't seen that, I'd suggest you have a quick look at that because that'll make life easier for us. But basically the mixed bag concept is a way that a lot of people actually think about themselves. Subconsciously, they're not really aware of it, but it's really a view where all your positive qualities and talents and things that you're good at, you know that you have those within you, but unfortunately it's all a bit mixed up with your own self-doubts and anxieties and worries and concerns, so that you don't really have a strong sense of who you are within there. It's a fairly confused way of looking at yourself, and it creates a lot of problems. It's half the reason why people have relationship problems and they end up suffering from anxiety and depression and various physical and mental health problems. So it ends up a fairly wishy-washy way for a person to try and go about their life. It's much better if people can identify the solid base of their positive qualities as that is who they are, and then they can lead their lives much more positively and constructively. Okay, so what does that actually look like? Well, that's what we talked about in video 2 with this model that we call positive centered psychology. Now, essentially this is a much better mindset for people to have. It's much more effective than this mixed up way of looking at yourself. Why? Because it helps you to center yourself on your positive strengths, because they're the basis of who you really are. These negative anxieties, worries, bad thoughts, bad feelings that you might have about yourself, these are all things that you've learned at some stage in your upbringing, in your early life, or because of various events that have happened to you. And now they've got a little bit stuck in your thinking, but they're not really who you are. If you can see those out to the side there, then it's much easier for you to deal with them effectively. Not only that, by getting a sense of yourself there, you then have a direction of where you actually want to move to and move forwards in the future. This positive centered approach is actually what the happier, more productive people in life already do. They've somehow or other they've already sort of got onto this idea. They have a good sense of self, and it's a positive sense of self. Okay, now some people actually identify with some of these negative characteristics, only they see themselves like this, and on the basis of, say, 1 or 2 negative traits, they'll judge their whole being, and as if, well, I'm a depressed person or I'm an anxious person. It would be better if they could identify themselves from this positive centered approach and say, well, I'm a good person, but I do have this anxiety problem at the moment. Or, yeah, I'm normally fine, but I'm struggling to deal with this depression. Okay, so in video 3, we're going to look at how do you, in practice, actually make the transition from seeing yourself from the mixed bag concept point of view, which is a very confused, difficult way to try and lead your life, to the much better positive centered psychology approach, so that you can identify yourself with your positive talents and abilities and separate yourself from any troublesome aspects of your life, so that you can not only deal with them more effectively, but you can identify with yourself and move ahead strongly and find a direction that's going to be just right for you. Let me actually give you an example of how this positive centered psychology can work in practice. Now, I had a young girl come in to see me. She was sent down from her college because she was suffering from terrible depression, having suicidal thoughts and getting herself into a bit of a bad state. Now, she came in to see me, and really she fitted well with this kind of mixed bag concept way of seeing herself. Basically a lot of negative depressive thoughts. She told me that she felt that she was really boring, that she was dull in the head, losing interest in life, not enjoying things at all, starting to get very moody and teary, and not going out and doing all the things that she would otherwise like to be doing. And that was the sort of mental state that she was in. So I asked her, well, where do all these negative thoughts come from? So then she thought about it and she said, well, probably comes from my background. My family were very hard on me, particularly my father. The way she described me, was one of those tough types that demanded a lot. Whatever she did, she felt it wasn't good enough. So as a kid, she'd developed these sort of negative thoughts. She then told me that when she was in high school years, she had a bad car accident with some brain injury. In fact, was in hospital for a number of months. Took her a long time to recover from that, and she got set back about 2 years into schooling. So then through all her high school years, she felt she was slow, unable to catch up, and more negative thoughts started to build up in her headspace. And now that she was at this course, she found just with the pressures of it that she was really struggling and starting to get quite severe depression. Now I just simply asked her, well, were you always like that? What were you like as a very small child? And this is what surprised me. She instantly lit up and she said, well, I was crazy. So I said, well, what do you mean you were crazy? So she said, well, when I was really small, I'd always run around and I wasn't afraid of anything. I'd go up to anybody and I'd chatter away to everybody. So people just laughed and said I was crazy. So I thought that was interesting. So I showed her my diagrams explaining the positive centered psychology model. But I asked her more and more about those early years of her life, what she liked when she was in primary school, in those very early years in kindergarten and so on, the sort of things she was interested in and talented at. So bit by bit, we gradually were able to build up this picture of the person that she truly was. She then was able to understand how these negative thoughts had got into her head, a lot of which might have been due to the way she was parented. Not that this is about blaming the parents, because I'm a parent myself and I know that all parents love their children and they want the best for them, but unfortunately we all stuff up, unfortunately, and can make things worse for our kids without realising it. We're trying to help them by giving them advice and helping them with things and telling them what to do, but of course sometimes we build up, unfortunately, some of these negative thoughts that they then get in their head. So with her there was a combination of factors that she was then able to see that, yes, this wasn't the way that was naturally right for her, that naturally she was this vivacious, positive, energetic person. And that was the main thing that she needed to centre herself and then start tackling things more effectively. Not only that, it gave her a vision for how she could look at her parents. She could see her father in the same way and see the things that she didn't like about him, but also accept that underneath that there was actually a loving, good person there. And she was then able to start relating with her parents much better. She came from Scandinavia, this young lady, and her parents were actually coming out to visit. And when they came out, she was able to ask them about things that had happened in her childhood, make new understandings of the whole thing, and feel a lot better about herself. As a family practitioner, it means that I see people over the years. So this girl had come back to see me a number of times since we had these original consultations, and she's maintained this good feeling of self-belief. All her depression and anxiety symptoms have actually resolved. She's not on any medication or anything, and she's happy with her life. She's got this good relationship going with her parents now, which she didn't have before. And the last I heard of her, she was travelling off overseas and involved in doing some good, effective work, basically her life back on track again. Now, why is this case important? Well, it's important for somebody like you, who doesn't even know this girl, but it's important for you because you might have some particular issues and problems in your life, and it might be anxiety or depression or some other specific issue that is troubling you. Now, dealing with those particular issues is important, but fundamental to everything is having this sense of who you are as a person. Half the time, if you can get that right, the problems themselves just disappear and you have to do minimal work to deal with them. If you don't deal with this issue of self and sort out who the real you is, then you find yourself endlessly trying to sort out issues and problems in your life, rather than centering it on your true self and who you are and moving ahead doing the things that are really right for you. So who is the real you? When someone asks you that question, it's not that easy to answer, is it? Do you see yourself in this mixed up way, or do you in fact have a clear sense of the person that you truly are? Now, a lot of people, when they're faced with this task of, okay, well, I want to sort out myself, I want to work out who I truly am, I want to get my life more centered, The whole thing actually, because they see themselves from a mixed bag concept, is just all too hard. They don't want to go there. They don't really want to look at themselves. They don't want to look at their past. And they're very sensitive sometimes to people who want to bring up issues from their past. Or they may have conveniently forgotten about a whole lot. Sometimes there's massive chunks of their life that are subconsciously being pushed away. Now I'm going to actually show you the practical way that you can sort it out. And by using the positive centered approach, it'll actually be a hell of a lot easier than you would have anticipated. There's actually 3 ways that I think you can start to look at yourself. First of all, let me just talk about looking at your past. Now, when you look at your past, people come in for counselling and come to see us, and when I ask them to tell me about their past, you'd be amazed. Usually they just tell you about all the awful things that happened to them. The terrible way they were treated as a child, all the awful things that happened, what their parents were like, and all the things that went wrong. And so you can easily, as a counsellor, be sitting there hearing all these negative stories. But of course, that's only just part of it. For me, it's really important to divide it up and extract out of the history the positive elements from the negative elements. And this starts off from the time when you were born. In your past, there will be some negative events that have happened to you. You will have generated some bad feelings. Maybe bad feelings about yourself, maybe bad feelings about other people. Perhaps your mother or your father or your brother or your sister, for instance. But at the same time, it's okay to look for those things and see what you can learn from those events. But you also need to learn more about your positive self. You need to look for the positive things that happen. What were the things that you really enjoyed? So, as it was with the girl that I just told you about, when you were a little kid, what were the things that made you feel excited? What were the things that you really enjoyed? Perhaps when you were at kindergarten or perhaps in early primary school. Did you like doing maths and science? Did you like English? Did you like writing stories? Were you fairly artistic? Were you creative? Or did you just really want to be outside and running around doing sporty athletic things? There's lots of little clues in your past that can tell you a lot about who you are. You can gather all those together and record them all as information so that gradually you can build up a picture of the sort of person you are as a kid, the sort of person that you were as an adolescent, and the things that became more interesting to you back then. Okay, so how to use this simple tool to learn more about yourself by reflecting on the past. So I'm going to give you something now which my patients have found really valuable, and it's just this tool here for separating out the positive thoughts from the negatives, and something that you can carry around with you every day. And I use it in my practice when we're reviewing the past. Now, I've just drawn these extra little bits here on the picture there for you, because one of the things that I do with patients is I get them to record information about themselves. So when they first come in to see me, they see themselves in this kind of mixed bag way, where everything's all jumbled up together and it's a bit of an ad hoc mess, hard to make sense of it all, hard to get a good direction going through into the future. And what we're trying to do is try and separate this out so that they can identify themselves. So in going through the past history, all that information you can pick up from the childhood stuff, anytime you come across something that feels like a positive element for you, you can just record that down there. Because there are many different clues. All the things that made you feel good, all the things that gave you a burst of positive energy, you can write those down there. Then of course there are the negative elements in it, and they can be written down there too. Sometimes it might be something like a parent might have said to them, oh, well, you're no good, you're useless, you're lazy. And if that goes on long enough when you're a small child growing up, it kind of gets brainwashed into your head. Initially you have the thought, oh, you're no good, you're useless. It gets switched around after a while into I'm no good, I'm useless. And this might be the sort of thing that you could write down on that on this side of the graph. This thought, this belief, this idea, I'm no good, I'm useless. Personally, I don't believe that at heart anyone is useless or anyone is no good. My belief is at heart everyone is positive. But the thing is, if you see yourself from the mixed bag perspective, when it's all jumbled up in there together, that thought, I'm useless, I'm no good, even though you know you've got the positive qualities, really makes it hard for you to identify yourself with that solid part of your character so you can be effective in life. So this is what we're trying to do there, and we can do a lot of this from looking at the past. So all the sort of questions that you might look at, all the different phases of your life that you've been through right up leading to today, and then all the issues relating to various family members and the influences that they had on you. After a while, when people are writing down these various clues and factors here, they do tend to identify that this positive side, people could call the real me. You might call it my true self, or other people will have another way of looking at it, something that they call for themselves. But this is the deep down person that they truly are, this positive person they're born to be. So I've written that down as the real me there. Then the whole collection of all the bad thoughts and feelings that have got into your head while you've been growing up and developing, they form a bit of a picture in themselves, almost like they've got a bit of a character as this dark character. People call that, well, my negative side. Some people call it my dark side or my pessimistic side, or some people it's a heavy weight, or they might have a really descriptive way of describing it. But in giving that negative side of character, it does help you in your day-to-day life when you're trying to deal with things. It does help you to think, oh, hang on, I don't want my negative side to be making my decisions here. I want the real me to be doing it. So what does the real me want to do here? So this is a graph here, and people can just keep it as a piece of paper, and you can keep it in your pocket or as a part of a notebook or something like that. And every time you get some positive thought or remember something that happened in the past that's an indicator of the true self, you can just sort of write those clues down. Okay, now we'll move on to looking at the present. Now, looking at your present, that chart that I just showed you before, where you can record all the information about the good positive things and also the negative things, you can use that in your present life. And it's good to carry it around with you. Perhaps just have a notebook there so you can record any positive thoughts that you might get during your average day. Now, in a normal day, your mood actually does change. So you know yourself, just watching this, that perhaps in the day that you're in right now, there'll be moments where your mood actually goes up, and there'll be times where you feel quite down. I use a graph a little bit like this, and this is a scale where you're feeling really good up here at sort of 10 out of 10, and when you're feeling really awful and terrible, you could be down at 0 when life's barely worth living. Around about 5's average. So I often, with people, ask them to just develop a bit of a sense of how you're feeling. People these days talk a lot about mindfulness and just being aware of your thoughts and emotions, feeling things, which is good. I think that's important. So in fact, in your normal day-to-day life, it isn't just a flat line. There are ups and downs. So, you know, you might be up here and feeling quite good, and something happens, you go down and feel awful for a while, and then, you know, it can vary. Some people spend quite a lot of time down here. You'd probably say you're feeling really depressed when you're like that, and you might come in and see somebody like me. And of course, if you're up here and sailing along, having a really happy time, you'll have no need to go and see a counsellor. But wherever you are actually on the scale, you still have your ups and downs. Even if you're really depressed, people who are really depressed still will have moments where they actually feel themselves making a rise from perhaps 2 up to 4. So these rises are important. Whenever you feel a bit more positive, you notice something's happened, and internally you can feel a little burst of positive energy. These are things too that you want to clue into. You want to say, okay, gee, I'm feeling better now. I wonder what it is that's making me feel better. There's something here that obviously feels right for me. What is it? So, when you notice yourself feeling good, ask yourself, what is it that's making me feel good? What is the vital ingredient here? And then write it down. You've got to get the exact thing. Now, sometimes people will have done something and it's been a great success, and everyone's patting you on the back, and you feel quite good because you've got a pat on the back. Well, it's not actually terribly valuable to write down that sort of thing, because everyone's going to feel great when they get a pat on the back. It's more when you're doing something, and it doesn't really matter what others might say. It doesn't matter if you're getting rewarded for being a success at it. It's more an internal thing of, gee, this is something that's feeling good for me. They're the sort of things that you want to write down as positive qualities on that chart there. Alright, so what if you feel down? What do you do when you feel down? Well, one thing that I notice, a lot of people when they feel down, They actually get overly hard on themselves and they feel even worse, and they can end up wallowing around in their misery. But I would say this, if you start to feel down, so every time there's a downturn, just ask yourself, what am I actually saying to myself? What are the thoughts that are going through my head? Because what I find with people is often there's some recurring lines, about 4 or 5 sentences or particular things that they say to themselves. Their voices in their head. Voices picked up at some point in their upbringing, but now they keep replaying this message. And it will be things like, there I go again, stuffing up, I've made a mistake, gee, I'm hopeless, I'm useless, this isn't going to work out, I'll never be able to do this, I'm going to fail at this, those sort of thoughts. So anyway, if you happen to feel down, as I say, rather than getting terribly upset by it, listen to those thoughts and write them down, what your specific sentences are. Later on you can look at those particular lines and most of the time you can figure out where they came from. I can ask people, when you get that thought, oh, I'm useless, where does that thought come from? You weren't born with that thought. A little baby, when they're happily playing around the place, doesn't get this thought, I'm useless. They're not even really thinking about other people, they're just doing what they want to do. So where does that thought come from? And most of the time people can say, yeah, I know where it came from. It came from things that my father used to say to me, as an example, something like that. So bit by bit, by recording all this stuff down, you can get aware of these negative forces in your head, and it almost has a voice, it almost has a presence, a particular feeling about it, usually quite an oppressive, heavy, dark sort of feeling. But the important thing with all of this is to write it down. If you don't write any of this down, if you don't write down the positive clues as to who you are and the negative thoughts of this dark voice in the back of your head, then you stay like the mixed up person with the mixed bag concept, with everything tied up together so that you really can't get control of your life. So once you start writing it down and keep a notepad on you every day, and every time you get either a positive move upwards or a negative move downwards, clue into what's going on in your mind and write down the vital aspects of it. And if you just keep recording the information bit by bit, a picture starts to become clear. You gradually get the picture of your true self, and you gradually get a picture of this negative dark side with its characteristics as well. Once you've got that, then you can get a much better sense of, yes, this is me. This negative dark side's not me, but I understand how it's got into my way of thinking. I wasn't born with it, so I'm not going to let it dictate and control my life. I'm going to get stronger at keeping it to the side, connecting with my true self as to who I really am, because this is the part of me that's going to be moving forwards for the future. Okay, so you can use the positive-centered psychology to look at your past and learn a lot of important things about yourself. And then you can also look at your day-to-day life and learn how your mind responds to the various events and things that happen to you, become more aware of your emotions and feelings, and again, get to know yourself much better. Now, are you ready to look towards the future? Because the human mind also likes to look at the future. These days a lot of people say, oh, you need to be in the present. But I think the human mind likes to look at the past because it wants to understand why. It wants to understand why you behave the way you do. It wants to understand why other people do what they do. The human mind does, in fact, spends most of the time involved in what's happening in the daytime, but it also wants to look at the future. Why do we worry, for instance? We worry because our mind is always thinking ahead. So it's important to get your mind focused right when you look towards the future. Now often I find when people come in for counselling that they have a set of problems, and we're basically taught that pretty quickly we need to get people to work out, well, what's your goal? Even at the first consultation, what's your goal? I've pretty much given up on that just for the time being, because I think it actually takes people a bit of time. If someone's in the mixed up concept of the way they're viewing themselves, often their goals will be inappropriate. It takes time to get to know them better. It takes time for them to get to know themselves. Your future goals in life should come from this positive core of who you are. Many people's goals actually come from various negative thoughts in their head. They're things like, yes, I should do this, or I ought to be doing more of that, or I must I must do perhaps this particular career. Things that often our parents or society, all these outside factors, things from TV, things happening in the media, all these thoughts that get into your head and tell you what you should do, how you should behave. Many people, their future goals are based around that. Now, if you spend your life trying to do things from this outer part of you, generally you'll end up feeling like a fish out of water. Why? Because these sort of attributes aren't really part of your core makeup anyway. This is who you are. The only way forwards to look towards the future is to have it coming from this side of you. So in order to look towards the future and come up with some meaningful goals, you do first of all need to examine your past and your present to learn about who you are. Once you've got a lot of information about yourself, then when you put all those factors together, then you get a bit of a picture as to who you are and what you might therefore like to do in the future. This is very important when you're looking at careers, for instance. If someone can look back on all the subjects they did at school, all the things they've ever been interested in, or perhaps when they look at a job section in a newspaper, all the particular aspects of particular jobs that make them feel, yes, gee, this looks interesting or that looks exciting. Put all those factors together and then you can get a good picture of the type of career that might suit you. Now, another point is when you're looking to the future, it's no good having your life just based around setting yourself goals and then flogging yourself to try and reach those goals in the hope that when you reach them that you'll feel good because you've been successful. A lot of people who come from the mixed bag concept, they are a little confused in themselves and they think, well, if I can achieve a big goal, then this will give substance to who I am. People will be impressed by that. People will think that's good. And so they'll flog themselves on towards that goal. But it's a very stressful thing. And if they should ever fail or not reach their goal, then of course they're completely distressed by that. In fact, their whole life becomes quite a stressful event trying to reach these goals. When they do reach the goal, they get a few moments of bliss, but it doesn't last for very long. Then they have to find another goal to head towards. For me, happiness is about knowing who you are. It's about knowing your true self. And this is the important thing, the second part of it is you then have to be doing the things that feel right for you. Happiness, most people when you look at the happiest times of your life, it's when you're actually doing something that actually feels right for you and you get this earthy pleasure coming from inside of you. It doesn't really matter often whether you're a big success at it or whether other people think you're fantastic for what you've done. It's more something that comes from within you. So these are some of the factors that I think are important when you're looking towards the future. You want to know yourself well and have a plan of the direction that you want to go in. It doesn't have to be a fixed goal, but I think it is natural to have a rough idea of the sort of direction, the sort of path that you want to follow. And if you use the positive-centered psychology model, then I think you'll be quite comfortable in yourself and you'll find that life will be easier and happier. And funnily enough, at the end of the day, you will be more successful as well. Okay, to summarize in the way that we look at the future, if you have a goal or an idea or something that you feel you might like to work towards, then you just need to ask yourself, is this something that suits me? Is this something that suits the person that I truly am? Or is this in fact something that I'm feeling that I ought to do or I should do? Don't do things because you feel you should do it. Do things because you want to do them, because they feel right for you. I think part of the problem is that when you're a kid you spend all this time doing things that your parents are telling you that you should do. But if you're not a kid anymore and you're watching this, if you're grown up, work out what you want to do and then you need to be strong. You need to stand up for yourself and say, yes, this is something that I want to try. And so then you try and do that. If it's something that doesn't feel right for you, then you equally need to be strong and assertive in explaining to people why it is that that doesn't feel right for you and why you've made a different choice. All right. Okay, now I've been talking about this for quite a while, but what's really important and what really makes a difference is if you will use this and actually start doing it in your own life. Now what I want you to do right now is just to get a piece of paper, a notebook would be good, And on one side of it, you can write down any positive thoughts as they come into your mind, let's say over the next 3 days. And on the other side of the paper, you could write down any negative thoughts. Or if you like, you can get a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle and write the real me on one side and my negative side or dark side or whatever you want to call it on the other. And just keep that paper with you and a pen. And don't try and predict anything. Don't try and predict the things that will make you feel good or not make you feel good. But just go about your life dealing with all the issues that you need to face. And just be aware. Just be aware of how you're feeling, the ups and the downs. As soon as you get those ups there, just try and be in tune with it. Something's making you feel good. Work out what that vital ingredient is and write down that thought there. If you get the negative thoughts, it's almost like a voice, something like a voice speaking to you, like a voice in the back of your head saying something, just those sentences. Write down the exact words of what they are. Don't try and analyse them, don't try and figure out necessarily where they come from right now. You can do that later on. Just write them down. Try and get in the habit of just separating out the pluses from the minuses. That's just the start of it. You can do that for 3 days. See how you go with that, and I'll bet you that you'll gather a bit of information there. You can relay your thoughts and the things you might have found about yourself from that, and I'd be very interested in hearing what it is. So I've got my email address down below. You can actually send me some comments and thoughts about it, or any thoughts that you've had about these previous videos that we've done. Okay, now over the next 3 days I want you to commit to something. I know people don't like being asked to do things, but anyway, I want you to monitor your thoughts for the next 3 days. That's all. Monitor them, and then I just want you to write down the positive thoughts when you get the little burst of positive emotion that you feel from within, and I also want you to write down the negative thoughts. Then, after 3 days, I want you to email them to me. So I'll get them, and I'll do my best to give you some feedback. But the most important thing is that just by you doing that, you will have made a start on clearing up the mixed bag, isolating your strengths, getting in touch with yourself, the person that you really are, so that you can have the sort of life that you really want. Okay, so in this video, I've given you an evaluation chart that you can use to make better sense of your past and your present and your future. Now for me, when I'm doing counselling with people, I usually use this chart all the time. I have two lists that I have going with patients. First one is a problem list, so they actually come in with some issues and problems that are on their mind, and I'll encourage the patient to get all these problems down in order, and we'll systematically work them through, and as the weeks go by, that's largely what we're working on. But while we're doing that, we've also got this list, so that at the end of the counselling period, one, they've worked out a good way of solving their problems and dealing with their issues, getting things under control, but two, they come out of it knowing who they are, having a good feeling about their past, happy with the way they manage things in the present, and generally on track to a path in the future that is right for them. There is more work to be done. These problems still need to be solved, and I'll show you some other important factors that you need to do to try and eliminate these and rub some of them out. So that's just going to leave you fully with the positive centered self there, all right? But in the next video, I'm actually going to show you how these dynamics can work for your relationships. Maybe up until now you've had really difficult relationships, or there might be some people you're having some major conflicts with. If you have two people who see themselves as mixed bags, trying to get something going together, their pluses and minuses will fire off each other. There can be all sorts of fireworks, it can be a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, or sometimes it's a coldness, it's a cold difficulty, really poor communication, or very unpleasant. If we can turn your relationships around so that not only do you feel good about yourself as a person, but you can learn to interact with the positive side of other people, then you can have really good relationships, even with people that others find very hard to get on with. Okay, so good luck over the next few days, and remember to write down that information on that sheet and email it to me, and we'll look forward to seeing you with the next video.